Hi, I'm Alexandra Zubko from Triptease.
And I'm Charlie Osmond from Triptease. And we saw on the news today some interesting information about the growth of independents versus big brands. And Alex, I know you had some thoughts.
Yeah, so something I've been thinking a lot about, part of my previous life at IHG when I ran the strategy team, I think the industry for hotel companies is fundamentally changing. I think that independent hotels are going to see a huge growth in the market over the course of the next 10 years, led in first instance by consumers who, as reflected in Airbnb and growth in independent markets, are choosing more boutique hotels.
But you say they're choosing more boutique hotels, and yet just last week, Richard Solomons from IHG was saying that all the growth in the market is the big brands at the moment.
So I think it continues to be the big brands, particularly if you look at it from a global perspective, because there are markets like China and a lot of the emerging markets where brands lend something very new to those markets. People who own hotels don't tend to have a hospitality background, and so they're really looking for expertise and management expertise for running their companies and their hotels. I think in developed markets, you'll see much more growth in independent hotels. Will it outpace brands? Will they ultimately have a larger share of the market than brands? I don't know.
And how about this sort of the middle ground where the big brands seem to be buying or creating like little sub-mini brands?
Exactly. So I think that is exactly the right response by big brands to the growth in what consumers are looking for, and also the outside options that independent hotels have. So as it relates to consumers don't necessarily want to stay in the same looking room regardless of where they're staying. They want to stay in a different place if they're there for business versus if they're there for a family vacation. So I think big brands are really well positioned to develop consumer insight and develop brands that really address those occasions as to why consumers might be traveling.
Okay, so you've lost me. Is it that the future looks rosy for independents, or that the big brands are going to become pseudo-independents and that's what's going to rule it?
I think both. So I think
Right.
independents will continue to benefit from this trend,
Right.
because I think independents can be well positioned to address a specific consumer need. But ultimately, independents don't have the same consumer research that brands do to change the way they welcome a guest, to change the way the room looks, to change the kind of entertainment or food and beverage offer that might address that.
Although one would argue that an independent where the general manager or the owner is very close to their customer, they don't need the research, right? Their research is walking the door every day.
That could be. No, that's absolutely right.
Okay, so what's the so what from this? What's the result?
So I think the really interesting implication is, one, what you've already mentioned, which is the way that brands respond to this trend. And I think you'll see a lot less of the 3,000 hotel Holiday Inns, Holiday Inn Expresses. I think the big brands in the future will be maybe 100 hotels, 200 hotels. So it'll be much more fragmentation in the market, much more specific and much more engaging with consumers. I think for brands being able to sign up franchisees and therefore grow, especially amongst conversions, so conversion from an independent hotel to a brand, will be much more challenging. Brands will really have to argue their case as to why an independent hotel should choose them over really what they could do, which is just to kind of cobble together what they need in terms of reviews, what they need in terms of a cloud PMS, what they need in terms of a booking engine.
Okay, great. And then that triggers quite well something I was hearing a lot in Berlin earlier in the month. One of the panels in Berlin was a group of CEOs from the big brands, and they were arguing that a key reason to drive direct bookings actually is that that's part of the sell to future franchisees.
And I think that's absolutely the case. And I think it's interesting to think about independent hotels and what will happen to direct bookings as a result of this trend. Because I think we will see more independent hotels. We will see more brands that have a number of smaller brands as opposed to larger brands. So what's the effect on direct bookings? I think there are effects one way and effects the other way. So the way in which direct bookings will suffer as a result is, I think, as you have more independent hotels, they'll rely much more potentially on third parties to play the role of the brand, to be that channel of revenue. On the other hand, I think a great way in which the independent hotels will benefit is because there is a much larger and more quickly growing independent market, means that actually technology providers, people such as ourselves, will actually become far more competitive. You get a lot more new entrants into the market because there's a much more attractive growing market to sell to.
Yeah, and I think the independents get a lot of value from the work that big brands are doing on the messaging to consumers about driving direct bookings.
Absolutely. I think all the work, the Hilton, Stop Clicking Around, the Marriott advertisement around direct bookings, anything the brands would be doing, rising tide lifts all boats, and independent hotels will benefit as well from that.
Great. Well, okay, I hope that's been of interest. If you have any feedback for us, please do let us know. If you want to find out more about TripTease, of course, get in touch. Thanks.
Thank you.